In this video we are going to fix 2 bugs, and we are also going to give the player the ability to slide under our knives whenever the enemy throws knives at the player. So the first bug we are going to fix has something to do with the enemy side here, because the enemy actually also takes damage whenever the player's knives hit the enemy side here. So if I run this game and I jump up here and throw a knife, then you'll see the enemy actually takes damage twice, and she's also going to die now when the knife hits her side. The other bug we are going to address is the fact that she dies after respawning right away here, as you can see. So whenever we kill her, she actually dies after she respawns, and that's not very cool. So the respawn death bug here is very easy to fix, and the bug is actually based on the die trigger here, because whenever we kill her, the die trigger isn't reset by itself at all times. So we need to make sure that the die trigger is not set like this, because if it is set like this, well, then she just starts dying right away here, and that's exactly what we need to fix whenever we respawn her. So to fix this, we will simply have to go to our script and go to the enemy script here, and inside the enemy script we have a death function, and in the death function we will just have to say myAnimator.reset trigger die. So this line of code here makes sure that the die trigger isn't set whenever she respawns, and we can actually do it before we go into idle, just to make sure that it doesn't go to idle and dying right away. And if we fix that or save the code, we should be able to kill her without her dying on her respawn. So let's try again. Kill her 2 times. Go. Yeah, kill her once apparently. And then she's dead. And if we respawn, then she spawns and starts throwing knife at me. So right now she's not dying on her respawn anymore, which is very good. So the other bug about concerning the side collider here has something to do with the way Unity actually makes their collision system. Their collision system actually makes sure that every single child object with a collider is considered one unit with the parent collider here. And this means that this box collider 2D on the enemy is the same part as this side collider here, as the sword collider, and so on. So because of this, we will have to make sure that the side collider here is a part of its own. Because if we go to our script and go to our enemy, and if we look here in the onTrigger enter function, and we do a debug.log here, and we write hit, well, then this hit function here, this hit line here, is going to be triggered whenever the knife actually also hits when a knife hits the side collider, even though this is inside the enemy script and the enemy script is sitting on the enemy here. Well, then this box collider here is actually going to trigger something inside the enemy script here. So if you run this, you'll see that it's actually going to write this hit 2 times. As you can see, it wrote hit twice, even though I only threw 1 knife. So we need to make sure that our side here is separated from the rest of the composition of these colliders. And the easiest way to do that is actually just adding a rigid body to our side. Even though we don't need a rigid body for physics, we can simply add a rigid body with kinematic on it, so that it actually separates this side from the rest of the system. So if we add component, add a 2D rigid body, remove the gravity scale, and set is kinematic, then we shouldn't have the problem anymore. So if we run the game and we jump up here and we throw a knife, we'll see that it didn't hit the side, but actually just hit the enemy here, and then she dies after 3 knives now. So now we fixed 2 of the bugs, but as you can see here, we actually just added another bug to our game, or another thing we need to fix at least. Because right now I am able to just jump up here, and if I could hit correctly, I'm able to jump up here and just kill my enemy without her actually reacting to it. So you can see here, I can jump up here and I can throw 3 knives and she just stands there and die. So we need to make sure that whenever she takes damage, she will start running towards the player and try to kill him, so that she doesn't just stand there passively. Because then the game is going to be very easy to complete, because you can just stand out of range of every single enemy and kill it. So to fix this, we simply have to go to our idle script. Inside our idle state here, this is the state she's in when she's just standing. Inside this state we have an untriggered enter function, and right now it's not doing anything, and she will never go from our idle state towards our patrol state unless she gets a target or unless the idle time is over. So we need to make sure that whenever the player hits the enemy, she gets him on target, so that she goes into the patrol state, and inside the patrol state she will enter into our ranged state or throw state or something. So we go back to idle, and inside the untrigger enter we make an if statement that says if other dot can I say tag, other dot tag equals knife. So if the enemy gets hit by a knife inside the idle state, well, then we simply say enemy dot target equals player dot instance dot game object. So right now when the enemy gets hit by a knife, it will start running towards the player because it acquires a target right away, even though it's outside the sight of the enemy. So let's try to run this game. And we jump up here. And if we attack her, boom, she gets hit and she starts running towards me and she tries to throw knives at me, as you can see here. Okay, so we need to test if this also works if we are standing behind her, and she shouldn't be starting to run towards the wrong direction. So if we move her here and we take the player and move him behind her so that he can shoot her in the back, then we play our game and we are going to attack her, and she turns around right away and starts to attack me. So this works because we already put in all the effort in the code that will make sure that she turns the right direction, she attacks in the right direction, and so on. So basically all the code we made before this actually works perfectly, because now we just added a lot of functionality actually just by writing one line of code. But there's one thing that still doesn't work. Right now when she's in idle, she starts attacking me, and that's totally fine. But if I wait until she goes into patrol and I throw a knife in her back when she's patrolling, you'll see that she doesn't turn around and attack me. So the reason that she doesn't turn around is because we haven't added this code here to our patrol state. So basically just copy this if statement here and go to the patrol state, and inside our onTrigger enter we'll have to add this if statement that states if she gets hit by a knife while patrolling, she will also acquire the player as a target and start to attack him. So let's try to save. I don't remember if I saved. Let's save and run the game again. And then when she starts patrolling, I will throw a knife in her back to see if it works. So she should patrol soon. There we go, we throw a knife and she turns around and she starts attacking me right away. So as you can see, everything works as it should right now with the side and with changing her state. Okay, so I simply just put my player back in his original position here and my enemy back in her original position, because the next thing that we're going to have a look at is the ability for the player to slide under the enemy knives whenever she throws knives at him. And the easiest way to actually fix that is to make sure that his collider gets shrunken down whenever he starts sliding. So if we pause here, you'll see that his collider is still way larger than his head here, or it's way above the top of his head. So we will have to make sure that his collider gets shrunken down. So basically we need to make sure that this offset here gets set differently, and the size here gets set differently so that it fits with his slide animation. So basically we also need to make sure that the knives doesn't pass into the collider when we shrink it down, because the knives of the enemy is basically in this area here where my mouse is right now. So we need to make sure that the collider goes below this area here. So I'm going to make sure, or I'm going to, in this game, implement it so that whenever a knife hits his head, he doesn't take damage. So it needs to hit his face basically for him to take damage. If you want to make sure that he takes damage even though it hits his head, well, then you need to make sure that the enemy's knives are thrown from a higher position on the enemy. But I choose not to move the knives up on the enemy because it looks a little weird when she's throwing the knife with her hand and then it spawns on her shoulder height instead of the hand height. So yeah, basically you can do it exactly as you want, but I'm going to make sure that she throws it at the same height, and I'm going to make sure that the enemy's collider is lower than the knife's position. We can actually try to test it here so that you can see the position of her knife. Let's try to run towards her. And actually I should start sliding so that we can test it. Let's try to run and slide. There. So if I slide here, and if we try to find my hierarchy and select the player up here, and we try to step, you'll see that her knife position is right here on the head. And if I select the knife as well, you'll see that it actually needs to go, the collider needs to go below this area here to make sure that the knife doesn't hit it. And basically I wrote down some numbers that I will use to make sure that this collider goes below the knife. And the numbers is, if I select my player, then you can see the offset here is basically the Y we need to fix. So basically the Y position or the Y size offset needs to be fixed, and the Y size needs to be fixed. The size of the Y is basically 2.11. So this is the correct size. But as you can see now, this collider is at his head, and we need to move it down so that it doesn't hit the knife. And the offset here is called minus 1.15. So if I go back here and select enemy knife and I keep stepping, then you'll see it passes just over the player's collider now, and the player doesn't get hit by this knife here, and he's out in the clear now. So now the enemy is able to slide under the knives. Basically, if these numbers doesn't work with your game because you have placed your stuff a little differently than mine, then simply just test this and make sure that you get the right numbers, so that you can actually slide under the knives or move the knife up or something like that. Another thing you need to address here is to make sure that the enemy side still hits the player's collider here when he's sliding after you shrunk it down. Because if the enemy's side is not large enough, let's say the enemy side went up here, well then the player will be able to hide from the enemy just by sliding, which means that you can run towards the enemy and slide all the way towards him so that he doesn't see you coming until you're standing there and hitting him. So make sure that your side is large enough to see the player whenever he's sliding as well. Okay, so basically we need to make sure we could do this from the code. We shrink down his collider from our code, and we need to do that inside our animation slide behavior here. Because the easiest way to make sure that the collider shrinks when he starts sliding and goes back to its original size when he's done sliding is inside the slide behavior. Because inside the slide behavior we have an enter here, enter function that is triggered when he starts sliding, and we have an on exit state, which actually, or on state exit, which is actually triggered when he's done sliding. So basically we can use these two functions to shrink the collider up here and to set it back to the original size. And to do that we will have to make a few variables. First of all, we need the variables to contain the shrunken size of him. So slide size equals new vector 2, and these are the numbers I wrote down before: 1.46, 2.11. 1.45, sorry, let's make it 46. 1.46 is my original size. If I click here on the player and go to the inspector, you'll see that the X size is 1.46. So we don't need to change the X size, we only need to shrink the Y size. And that's why I'm setting the Y to 2.11. Then we need to make a private vector2 called slide offset is equal to new vector2, and that's 0. minus 1.15. And as you can see here, the offset is 0 in X. So that's why we put we put 0, and the Y offset we just used before is the value of minus 1.15. Okay, the next thing we'll have to do is to make sure that our private vector2 size here, this is our original size, and we make a private vector2 original offset. So these two are the original values we'll need to reset to after we have set the collider size and offset to this. Besides that, we'll need a reference to the collider. So we make a private box collider 2D box collider. So this is a reference to the player's collider. So we don't need to get component every time we slide, and this should be cheaper than getting the player's component all the time. Inside our onState enter, we say if our box collider is null, if we haven't set it yet, then we say box collider is equal to player.instance.getComponent box collider 2D. So we get his collider, make a reference to our our variable, and then we say, well, our size is equal to box collider.size, and our offset is equal to box collider.offset. So now we have stored the original size of our box collider and the original offset of our box collider here. The next thing we have to do is to shrink it down, and we can shrink it down by saying box collider.size equals slide size, and box collider.offset equals slide offset. So now we are shrinking it down when we are done. So if we save now, not when we're done, when we are sliding. So if we save now and play the game, and I run and slide, and I select my player, then you'll see the collider is now small. And if you didn't see it, it's right now when I play the game from the start, it's a large collider, and when I slide, it gets shrunken down here to the correct size. But I will have to reset it, because if I do it right now and slide, the collider is still small and it's below his chest, which means that I can go up here and not get hit by all the enemy's knives. It can only take melee damage. So let's make sure that it gets back to its normal size. And we can do that down here by saying box collider.size equals size, and box collider.offset equals offset. So if we save now and jump back to the game, you'll notice that the collider gets small when he slides, and when he's done sliding, it gets back to its original size. So let's see if I can time this correctly to run under the enemy's knives. Maybe it's going to be too hard for me to do, but let's see. Jump up here, and I run, and I slide. There we go. And I run again, and I slide. Yay. And I can still take damage when I'm standing up here. Let's see if he's frozen knife. There we go. So now we have the ability to run and slide under the enemy's knives whenever she's throwing at us. So that's basically what I wanted to address in this video. Again, thank you everyone for all the suggestions and all the bugs you're reporting. It just helps me make these tutorials better. I know it's a while since I've made a video, but I'll see what I can do in the following weeks to keep adding all these small features that you guys want. It's very awesome that you're coming up with all these features that I can implement, because sometimes I'm totally out of ideas. So it's great that you come up with these small things. Thank you for watching my video, and if you haven't done it already, then please consider to subscribe to my channel, like my Facebook page, and follow me on Twitter. Also, if you want to support my work and you like this tutorial, you can support me by going to a Patreon page, which is on the screen right now. On the Patreon page, you can support me and get all my tutorials, all the projects to my tutorials, and all the sprites and everything I'm using in them. And you can also get private tutoring and stuff if you support me there. If you want to support me in another way, you can also support me by clicking the link on the screen to acquire this project or any of my other projects. Again, thank you very much for watching.